let's talk a little bit about heads and doing them quickly when you're anticipating starting a drawing of a model. This is an idealized male skull, and we're going to use this as our template and talk about proportions and bone points. The human head is not very flexible in terms of its construction. You have parallel bone points here, and here, and here, and here, and at the back of the jaws, and at the chin, and underneath the nose. So when I'm looking for the head, when I see it from the front, I'm looking for how these guys relate to each other, whether they tilt down, whether they tilt up, whether they turn, whether they tip in perspective, backwards or forwards. And they give you excellent markers to tell you where everything is in space. And as long as you don't draw all the details too soon, looking for these bones where they come to the surface is a really helpful guide for building heads fast. So we are going to place our little model down here. And what I notice is that it's already tipped. And we're just going to do a series of little quick skulls here. So when you're looking at the head, if you start from the back and work your way forward, that's great. But you want to be looking to see how it narrows to the front planes. And where's the base of the skull in relation to that, and how it flares out here. Now, everyone's proportions are slightly different. And our job as artists is to look to see how the uniqueness of those shapes make each person an individual inside the continuum of humanity. But the point here is to look for the bone points. That's a bone point, that's a bone point, that's a bone point. The cheekbones are the whitest spot on the front of your model's head. Have they flesh or no? And then everything slides into the center. So because we know that, when you look at people's heads, one of the things that you're always looking for is how acute those angles are as they go in towards the center. And roughly the space between here and here is 1/3 of an adult head. Between here and your model's hairline is 1/3. And from here down to the chin is also roughly 1/3. Even in the jawbones, the shapes tilt in and slide down towards the front of your model's head. So you're looking for these keys that get you around these corners and get you an attitude going between this, and always check at the end the basic proportional shapes here. So if I were drawing a very fast drawing of a model, I probably wouldn't get much more information than this, because it's enough to then place the features later. But because we have our little friend, the skull, sitting here, we're going to pursue this just a bit more. So notice how rounded the set of teeth are. Your mouth parts, as we'll discover, also wrap around that rounded quality of things. And what we're looking for is the axis that goes out and back in that establishes the shape of the lips over the top of your model's teeth. When we come up here to look at our eye sockets, notice there's a short up curve and a down curve, and then these shapes go out to the corners, and this is bone. So for those of you that like to draw eyeballs floating free inside someone's head, just remember that they have to sit inside this arch of bone that goes around towards the back and drops down and sits on top of the cheekbones. And if you can see how these guys relate, them placing the eye inside that rounded shape becomes relatively easy, because the golf ball that is your eye then has a home it goes into. So we're looking for the construction of these basic shapes, and without belaboring the point, where they fit. So we're going to turn our model sideways, and I'm looking at my model in profile. So when I see my model from the side, again, in this instance, we're going to draw a little bit of the brain case here. I love that word. Now, one of the fun things about this right here is where the muscles of the neck go from the front and the back down to make your model's shoulders. And your ear sits right on top of this and actually covers that connection up. And so what we're looking for here again is the evidence for how the cheekbones, you can actually see here's the hole, the aperture for your ear here. So when I look at people from the side, what I want to see is the floor of the eye socket going back in and the tilt of the cheek plane going out towards the nose. And I'm not going to draw the nose. If I see someone in profile, I'm looking down on my model, so this little paired feature ear goes down and away from me. If I can see this tilt here, it's much easier than getting all the bones and cartilage going that attach the tip of the nose to the face. A little form over form, because again, I'm looking down on my model. And always ask yourself, how far out in front do the features go in relationship to the forehead? The forehead shape is 1, 2, 3, and then you're up under your hair. And one of the cool things about this is that here's that curve again of your teeth, and look at how it rises up and encompasses the curvature of your model's dentition. It's high it's up on the front, it's down under on the lower part of the jaw, and one of these keys to drawing people well is to look for the shape of the tilt of the jaw to see where the flange of these big muscles here that sit all inside there. There's always a change of shape between here and here, and a curvature that goes up and around, and up and around. And now you have your model skull. Notice also that the back of the neck is very much underneath here. So this little thing here, if you can find where the ear is on the jaw, allows you to get the sense of the chords of the neck established. And here, because these are the attachment points for the muscles going down the back of your neck, if you can find this, the two of these together conspire to set up the diameter and tilt of your model's neck at all times. So we're going to do one last thing here. And here we have next to nothing going on. So we're going to tilt it slightly so I can actually see something. Props. So as you see your model from the side, you're also looking for what's the shape of the brain case and the apex of it, and how it narrows. There's a tilt across here, and there's a tilt across here. And then you can see underneath the skull, there are bone points, again, those attachment points for the back of your model's neck. And again, the widest spot here is that little tick, that little bit of bone that sticks down that allows the muscles going to the front of your neck to attach. You can even sometimes see a little bit of the cheekbone sticking out depending on your point of view. And you'll notice that the jaws tilt in, and then they really tilt in as they go down towards where your model's chin is. We're drawing through our model's neck. We set the skull on top of that, and we get the vertebrae of the neck coming out of there. And when you see people from behind, you'll often see this muscle and this muscle going in opposite directions. This goes to the front. This goes to the back. You always want to look for that little bit of form over form in relationship to the standoff shape of the ears. So you're always looking for paired features across, 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 and across. And you're looking for tilt. So if you compare where this is, where's the center of your model's chin and the center of your model's nose, if you hold up a series of vertical lines, and there you have a discussion about some of the points of seeing the human skull. We're going to do one last very foreshortened view here. fact, we're going to lay our model down. And everything is rounded. So our model's brain case goes from narrow to wide, and from narrow to wide. But in relationship to the center, you're always looking for how these basic planes tilt away from it or towards it. Now when you look up at the model, everything rises to the center. And when you look down, if the model tilts their head, everything falls away. So it's really, really cool and kind of fun to look for how these shapes fall away. The bone structure that traps the eyes, how does it fall away? And how does the shape of the cheekbones as they go around the socket and climb up to the bridge of your nose? And when you see people in severe foreshortening, look how high the aperture for his nose is here. This shape is now higher than the top, or high as the top of the inside of the eye socket. So this little teardrop shape there is the opening, and as it rises up, we're going to finish this out, Chuck, aren't we? See how everything curves away? So before you draw someone, you're always looking for, are they tilting across, but what's the roundedness towards the center line of your model's face? And this is really exciting. So here you can see the roundedness of the mouth parts, very pronounced. And when you have foreshortening, all this stuff tends to disappear. The planes that, these planes, when you're looking up at something, shorten up. But what you really notice is how incredibly and profoundly round the shapes for the jaws are. The shapes for the cheekbones are. And how they fall back in space. This is also why when you're drawing skulls, it's good to have some models around the house. And notice the comparative anatomy. You know, how we all have the same basic parts. Everything is paired, but how different is a horse from a human or a cow or a chimpanzee? And we all have our own specific, species-specific geometry, and within that, all of us as individuals have our own individual geometry that is a variant on the scale of things. So I'm just going to toss a little value in there. We're going to get that jawbone falling down. And another comment here about thickness. See how it rises up? Sharp edge. Sharp edge. That's why when you look up at people, you see their chins and then the structure of their neck set further back behind that. And our model skull goes way back in space behind that. So what you're always looking for is this idea that everything is curved, that these bone points show you tilt and design and attitude, that these measurements give you relationships that if you look for negative shapes behind the model, when you find those verticals, you can literally assess, well, how far out do these things stick in relationship to the part of the curve that you're holding, the vertical or the horizontal tool that you're comparing against. How do these shapes measure against that? And that allows you to establish heads very quickly. So now that we've talked about skulls, let's talk about people. Here's our friend. We're going to put him over here. And I have a series of photographs of one of our esteemed models here that I'm just going to lay in some very quick, simple decisions. Because if you tend to start with this for a head, the second time you draw it, it may be this, and it may be that the third time. And it's a decent marker, but it tends to misplace where the neck starts, and it tends to miss the character. And I happen to believe that when you draw people, one of our jobs is to sort of be an artistic vampire and steal their souls, boom, and put them on paper and make magic happen with that. So if I look at my model, I want to pretend I've never seen them before. I'm going to assess the tilts of things, and what I observed with this model is he is very angular. He has a long, narrow face, not much of an upper lip, angular nose out to the ball of it, then it becomes very round, small ears, high skull in the back, and he's looking downcast, and he's looking down. So I'm looking at the tilt towards the center. So if I am in a short pose, I may start with something as simple as an estimation of where his skull is. I'm not going to hold myself to this, but what I want to do is I want to say, okay, in a short pose, if my model's got good strong eyebrows, I'm going to use that shape to get across this, to make a comparison across. Reassess. I'm going to find his cheekbones on this side and this side, and here's where the cheekbones come in and the bones come down, and there's a little short curve, long curve. This curve here on this side, it appears here. And so what I'm looking for is the basic character of the shape of his cheekbones and a little bit of the floor of his eye socket, nose rather, back here. And then I'm going to cheekbones, cheek muscles, get back to here. By the way, using people's hairlines is a very useful tool because where the cheekbones and the hairlines meet, generally speaking, you'll notice I switched to drawing tonally here. The shape of the mop of hair generally follows the shape of the skull. It's oftentimes easier with guys' hair because it's often a little more closely dressed. But what you're looking for with anyone is how closely does this replicate the shape of the skull, and compare the top of the ears are up here on our model, and the bottom of his ears are a little below the eyeball. That needs to be a little shorter. That needs to be a little more dramatic. And where is his chin in relationship to his forehead? The soft parts wrap around. And we're now ready to leave. And before I do, one of the things I want to check is in relationship to the bone points, and soft tissue points here. You can sometimes draw right around that. And without adding the mouth, you can even put the mouth in place implicitly by finding its connection to the chin. And anything after that is just pure gold. So you can leave it at where it was. The nice thing about that is it instantly gives you great measuring points to establish the relationship of all the rest of the body parts. Where is my model's shoulders, which are beautifully asymmetrical, and that's parallel with his nose. It's all the way up here. And this is not meant to be pretty or final or much more than just an indication. Always look, by the way, one last little trick here. The moment you start to find the inside of the eye socket, make sure you show a little bit of the top of the bridge of the nose and the side of the bridge of the nose, because what you want to do is you want to make sure that your model's eyeballs are properly spaced within that shape. So that's enough to get you started because it gives you attitude and design, and it's not pretty, but it allows you to assess where everything else in your model's body is as you go forward in your drawing process. So with that in place, we're going to again go back up here and give him just a little more height here. We're going to switch poses. And now we're looking up at our model. Same guy, same arrangements. So when I look at the design, I want to check to see what the tilt of his forehead away is, because you're always looking to see how radically that set of curves tilts away. And whereas his chin is parallel with his out there. It's way over to one side because his head's tilted. So, you know, if you started with this, you might get the attitude going. If you started with this, you might get the attitude a little better because you're separating the ball from that shape. But take a moment, slow down just a little bit, and look for, if you see people from the front, get this plane established. It doesn't take very much, but it gives you, one of the great things is it starts you thinking about your model as a design problem. If you're thinking about the character of people, one of the things you're thinking about also is what do the shapes that make them specific, make them be them, look like. And if you take a little more responsibility at the beginning, and this would go a lot faster if I wasn't having to worry about talking to you guys when I did this. So upper third, skull cap of the hair. How far down below his eye sockets are his ears? Way down here. Always put a little bit of structure when you're drawing ears because you want to make sure that they don't look like big blank shapes. And once you close a shape off, that shape starts to demand the eye to look at it. So you want to give the viewer just a little payoff. His jaws tilt in. Everything tilts from the cheekbones south. Everything tilts in towards the chin. The question is simply how much? As in more, Chuck, more. Now, if you're concerned about proportions at this point, because we don't have anything in the center, you can establish where the bottom of the center of the nose is in relationship to that, and lightly indicate the bridge of your model's nose out to the tip, and just compare where's the center line, the little philtrum shape here, because if you can find this, then establishing where the lips are becomes very easy, and you just pull your shape away from that. 3 parts on the top, 1, 2, 3. 2 parts on the bottom, left and right. How does this shape attach to the ball of my model's chin? Just look for that little plane. It's a plane that goes down, up, and then down again in the corners. And then just check where the points of your model's chin bones are here and what kind of shape do they have. So this is a point where you can change character quite easily on someone by making the chin a slightly more rounded shape or angular shape. And along your model's jaws, you want to make sure that you watch how clean these jaw lines are so that you don't unexpectedly age your model. We're going to shorten this just a bit more. And again, this idea of drawing linearly and then drawing tonally, it's really important to be able to be fluid and go back and forth between those two MOs, because you can then paint shapes down as well as draw them linearly and just go back and forth between those two worlds. Bridge of the nose, floor of the eye socket, soft tissue and underside of the eye socket, and see how from big to little you just are in control. Every little detail you add in after that helps to explain it to the viewer, and it helps to locate it for your drawing, and then it makes it be in the right spot for your viewer. And you also have a great set of measuring tools to assess the size and location of everything else below that. So I'm not here to talk to you about how all the little features work, but I am here to talk to you a little bit about breaking it down. Oh my goodness, now we have that upshot, and he's slightly tilted over to one side, and because we're looking up at him, all the planes that tilt up go away, so we see less of them. That's called foreshortening, And so what we're going to do is do a quick scan. One eye's higher than the other. All the upside of the curves are tilted up a whole lot more. That's parallel with the inside of his eye socket or eyeball. And his ears are all the way down below his nose. Oh my goodness. Okay, so now we're going to do a little quick lay-in. See how rounded his forehead shape is? My goodness. And how little of his forehead shows? Oh my gosh, that's called foreshortening, because all the planes that are up there, they tilt away from us, and now we're looking up from below, and that causes all sorts of problems. So here's the frontal planes of his forehead, and sometimes you can use the bones. If your model has good eyebrows, you can use those shapes too. And you'll notice that what we're seeing here underneath is an awful lot of the underplane here, the underside of the eye socket. So if that's so, I will tend to use not the eyeball itself, but the socket shape as it wraps around that to help establish a pretty tricky set of relationships. Brows. See how he flares out? He's wider over here. It's so cool. And he drops down. He falls. He gets narrower as he goes. Cheekbones. Jawbones tilt in. We should probably add, what do you think, a little schnozola here. See how it laps over the arc, that's overlapping, that's form over form. And because we're seeing him from beneath, when you're drawing noses, find that. What's that little cartilaginous, I like saying that word, cartilaginous spire, it's like a sailboat, and that's the boom that holds the sail up to the mast, and the mast is the center line of your head. And what you're looking for is where the nose attaches here, and it's like a little upside down teacup that falls away from its center line, side to side. Now the tilt here and here is going to show up in his mouth. There's that philtrum, and we're going to find his upper lip. We're going to pull that shape away. Not much upper lip on this fellow. It really tucks in. And the line that his mouth makes goes well out past that. So always watch where their lips tuck back into the cut line, the opening of your model's mouth, because that changes a lot from person to person. And it changes a lot too if you have somebody wearing lipstick, because the ideal of the decade influences the shape that lipstick takes as you apply it as makeup, because what you're trying to do with that is decorate and idealize how you present yourself to the world. All right, so what I notice here is he goes back, and then he goes up. He goes from a soft edge to a hard edge to a soft edge. This goes behind, this goes in front, form over form. And it's important to look for this plane. What's the shape of this little triangular plane here in relationship to the center line of your model's neck? That's always softer than the edge when you're seeing it from the front, the little center structures. And this is a gender dimorphism thing. When you hit puberty, most males, this little cartilaginous structure here becomes more pronounced, and it's a character development point. So you can play it up and make someone look, if they have a nice thick neck, it will make them look more macho. Okay, so what did I say about his ears? They're that far down, so to find his ear over here. Come on, Chuck. A little structure inside. Just break it up. And you'll notice that it does the same thing over here. Oh, that's super cool. Oh my gosh. Look how tilted his head is. And now we can come back in and we can put the mop of hair on top of that. So what I'm doing first is I'm squinting and I'm looking for the general shape. So when you're drawing hair as illustrators, it's important to see mass and direction first, and then texture and pattern within it second. So with that in place, then I can come back in and I can build the patterns that make the hair specific to the model or the hairstylist's desire, and it conveys the sense of what it is, as well as the texture pattern and value of it. There we go. Okay, so we're going to do one more pass here, and this time we're going to draw somebody who has much more rounded features than our other model, and I'm going to do a couple of views here very quickly. So our model's head is tilted slightly, big round cheekbones, big round forehead. Her kerchief and hair come together to make a unit. So we're going to start right here, and we're just going to draw this across. So unlike our other model, this model's head, make this a little shorter. There we go. This model's head, she hasn't got really strong supraorbitals, but she has beautiful definition of structure here. Get the spacing here. This little keystone-shaped plane tucks in, and this flares out. And then she has very pronounced and very wide and round cheekbones. So that's cool. I like that. That's fun to draw. They sweep around towards the front. And I'm looking, again, what I'm always looking for here is if I see something on this side, what's the evidence for it on the other side? And if that's that wide, then I know that her cheekbones will be the widest thing on the front of her head. And she has a very short jaw shape here and a short jaw shape there that tilts in. Chuck, that doesn't do what you were doing. And then everything slides towards the center. And she has a very soft, round ball structure here on her chin. So the basic shapes are going in. If this is a 5-minute drawing or a 10-minute drawing, you're now free to walk around and draw the rest of your model. But you have enough to have a really solid measuring point here to establish where the rest of your model's body is in space, and then you can come back to it, time permitting, and add all the features in that make head drawing so fun. It provides the detail, but what you really got is you've got the basic housing for all the fun parts. And we're going to paint just a little bit of her hair down. This is the sort of fun stuff here on this side. If you find it on one side, it's sort of incumbent on you to find it on the other side too, so that people don't, because everybody expects that if you're going to see this, there's a beautiful slender little neck, a little bit of value. So that's part the first, but now what we're going to do is we're going to use a little bit of the turning form from the lighting, and we're going to look at she's got a little bit of a muscle shape change there. We're going to run these down to her chin. We're going to paint the shape in. We're going to adjust the tilt. We're going to draw a little bit of her eyes into her eye socket. Now always look for the spacing between the eyes and look for the tilt between here and here and across from here to here. Short curve, long curve, and assess where she's looking. At the moment you start to draw eyelids, think about the shape of the eyeball and the iris, the color part inside there. And then in relationship to these, what's the shape of your model's nose? I can't imagine a more dramatic counterpoint to our previous model, because these are all a series of little round shapes that sit on top of the line of her upper lip. Little stop sign shape there. That's a little too harsh, Chuck. And again, find this Get a little bit of this shape in here. Keep thinking, well, what's that teacup shape doing, that upside down teacup that gives her lips curvature? And she's got this kind of little smug smile on her face. It's super cute. And so I want to make sure that I get the corners of her mouth established in that little pull up and pull up and attach. Slightly asymmetrical lower lip, and it all sits on top of the ball of her chin. So we've got our model. We've come back and we've kind of cleaned up and designed the shape of my model's head a little better. Now we've got our model looking down. Oh dear, he said. So we see a lot more of the top of her skull. She's pretty tilted from one side to the other, and her chin is parallel with the center of her head. So what we're going to do is we're going to start, I don't know, today I'm feeling like starting with the back of my model's skulls for some reason. Usually I start with their forehead across, and this makes for a very nice blank shape. Just have to mix it up. So now we're going to use a little bit of her hairline, which I notice is somewhat asymmetrical, and wrap this around. This to me is no longer hair, it's a wraparound with a little soft shape here that encompasses the shape of my model's skull. There's a sense of continuity here, that this curve comes down, and then that curve comes out, and then this curve comes down, and then that curve goes towards the center line, and she tilts up. That's sweet. And then here are her cheekbones. Always look for the form over form, and in fact, make that comparison. How radically there's cheekbones does she tilt away? And on this side, because we're looking at the form inside the face, it's probably not a great idea to draw a big line there, huh? But we're looking for the shape of that. And if you can see it, look at how beautifully the bones of her forehead wrap around her eyeball in here and automatically form where you're going to place that eye and where you're going to place that eye inside that. So again, we're going to pull this back. Our cheekbones go back towards our model's hairline. Our model's ears are parallel with here. And we have kind of run out of room to do anything but place them there. There's your ear structure. And a little short throw here because she has a very short jawline between here and here. Get the angle right, Chuck. And beautifully rounded set of shapes. Everything is going right to the center. Everything is going right to the center. And in a fascinating sort of way, here's that soft tissues of her cheekbones that are covering up where they run right through into the curve of her mouth. Oh, that is so wonderful. Whee! To the center. Lower lip in this case sticks out. Ball of her chin goes underneath. Now we can come back in. We can add the nose on top of that. But as soon as you have this case closed off, you have the shapes you need to move on down the form. And if you can't see your model's neck because the hair is in front of it, not a pretty drawing, but a serviceable, architecturally speaking, drawing. These shapes then, turn your chalk on its side and paint them down. And try and suss out the flow of the shape. And try not to draw the lines that you use here too hard, and break these things up into their biggest constituent shapes flowing in the direction you see them as going. and that will help you to see the architecture of hair. Hair is like water. It flows over the rocks in a wave form. And that waveform just happens to be made of hair instead of water molecules, and they sit on top of your model's shoulders. So with that in place, then you can there we go. A little better. Not perfect. And if you want, you can use value to hold shapes here too. You can turn this whole thing in. But if you start to use value, make sure that you pull the shadow shapes all the way from one end of the model to the other. And I'm going to destroy this. See how drawing hard lines inside hair, actually it takes over the drawing and you won't, the illusion falls apart. So one last quick sketch of our model here. Now we have a 3/4 side shot. This is sort of a glamour shot. She's looking at the camera. She's got one eyebrow up slightly. Her forehead tilts back nicely. It's not quite a third of her face. And she has very long round cheekbones, and her chin is parallel with her faraway eye, inboard eye shape. And her head kind of looks like a football in that this shape comes to a point, it comes out, and it wraps around. Again, like I said, these will not be pretty drawings, but they'll capture the essence of the design of the thing and the scale of the thing and allow you to move on with the rest of your drawing process and then come back to them and finish them at your leisure. Here's that forehead shape, here's that eye socket shape, and in relationship to the hairline here, here's the shape of the planes of the near side of her forehead. You can see that little highlight shape there is very helpful. Eyebrow up, it tucks in, turns under the eye socket. Oh my goodness gracious. Plane, eyebrow, eye socket. If you compare, what's the tilt of this? What's the general angle of that away from this part that sticks out the most? Get that started. Here's your double check on this side. What's the shape of your model's brows? What's the shape of your model's skull? Pull that back a little bit more, Chuck. Her ears are parallel with that and tilted forward along the back side of her jaw. Here's the back side of her jaw. Now, because I'm not drawing the center of the face, I'm going to very lightly indicate this tilt, because if I'm in a hurry and I don't find any of the core features of her face, now look what happens. I can just barely make out the front of her neck and then the thrust of the design of her hair. So that's enough to get you out of there. And here we have a drop fold. But if you want to take it a little further, wide spot, wrap it around here. Look for the ball of her chin. Look for the floor of the backside of her nose underneath her eye socket. Isn't that cool? Notice what I'm not drawing here. No eyeballs have been misplaced in this drawing yet. And then a little bit of the bridge of her nose. Always be delicate with this line, because if you overplay that, you make people's noses pop out of their faces too much. About the lower third. And that's especially true with children and women. You want to see the shape of the nose, the bridge of the nose, but you do not want to overemphasize that, because then you call all this attention to it. Here's the philtrum, drops down. I notice that her mouth is slightly curved down, up and across. It wraps around. There's that little Mona Lisa smile thing going on in the corner. We're going to find the slash, and then we're going to build the upper lip shape. Oh, that is beautiful. 1, 2, 3, yes. And the basic construction of things go in and are perpetually being adjusted. But you have so much more of the design and the intention of who your model is. And when you see with this sort of an approach, and when I'm doing a long portrait drawing, I will do quick sketches in this approach, but I will certainly always kind of go back to angles and shapes in a short pose where I want enough detail to get the point across. I will use this more aggressive searching out of curve and design, and one reinforces the other, because the sooner I can see how my model's head is shaped and the design of their features, it means when I am measuring at a more leisurely pace, I am more sensitive to the design of the model's parts. And the two worlds, oh, Chuck, what did I just say about not drawing anything in people's ears? Good Lord. There we go. Oh, look at that beautiful shape. This and this are parallel. Her hair changes shape and cascades down. And again, we've got one of these situations where our model is, again, I have this anchor point of where her chin is. That helps me to find where the back of her shoulders are. By measuring against that known shape, then I can flow her hair over this lightly, and I can also flow her hair over this lightly and trap her shape of her head a little more effectively. And at any point that I stop, when I move away from this, this is cool too. Little dark accent points here. Ha. And ha. And ha. And ha. And put a little more value in there. And the thrust of her pose goes way out in front of this. And the nice thing about this is now I know exactly where the wall of her chest is going to be, and I can draw to it with confidence, because this gave me a place to stand where I am firmly in control of the proportions and shapes of things, because at every point the starting points, my measuring points, give me the sense of where things are in space below that. And when you have challenging shapes that are not quite so obvious, then having these reference points to go back to is an enormous help. Okay, have fun.